Mainstream media in the West is obviously broken. Yet, the more dysfunctional the industry gets, the more it seems to be denying any wrongdoing, blaming anything from technological progress to social media and fake news for their demise. Instead of soul searching, we get a relentless blame game, and this trend is getting worse. After all, Chomsky and Herman, after publishing their book on manufacturing consent, got at least still invited and interviewed about it on mainstream media. These times are long gone. To help us make sense of this development, I've got today with me Felix Marquard, who proposes viewing media under the lens of addiction. Felix is himself a former mainstream media journalist with an elite background, and he's also a recovering drug addict. He recently started a strange kind of anti-Facebook called Black Elephant, and he'll tell us all about it now. Felix, welcome to the channel.
Thank you, Pascal. It's really good to be here. Neutrality studies has been changing me and affecting my journey and really displacing me. And I'm very grateful to be part of this wacky crew of people.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you are. And we've once talked before, and I was very impressed by the way that you framed what's going on to us also in the media space. And maybe we said for today, we want to connect addiction, media, and elite networks. And maybe either start with what you think is important or start with Black Elephant and let us know a bit your journey and how you're viewing what we all collectively are experiencing at the moment.
I think I can leave Black Elephant for later. I'll start with what you alluded to, and you mentioned manufacturing consent and the work of Chomsky and Herman. Before them, long before them, in 1960, I believe, or in the 60s, a strange, misknown Frenchman of Maltese and Portuguese descent, Jacques Ellul, wrote a book called Propaganda. And in that book, he, I think, laid the foundation of what Herman and Chomsky were going to do. But he also, in many ways, had an insight that they don't really spend much time on, which is that propaganda is not merely a tool of manipulation. It is a sociological trend. And I found this as an addict in recovery. I've been grateful to have over a decade without drugs and alcohol after 25 years of using drugs every day. And I found the parallels between his analysis of the role of propaganda in our societies, not the societies where we love to see propaganda, not in the Pravda, not in China, but in the societies that purport to be the most free in the world. And what Ellul, I think this is an amazing man who's written about many subjects. His favorite readings were Kierkegaard and Marx. Gives you an idea of the breadth of this guy. And he's considered by many the best way of defining him is he's often referred to as a Christian anarchist, as someone who identifies as in a way as a Muslim anarchist. I really relate to Ellul for many reasons. I was also born and raised in France, but with parents who are not French. And but the thing that Ellul is so I think his most interesting insight perhaps is that knowing that you are being propagandized does not help you get rid of it. It doesn't help you transcend that state. And this reminded me immediately of addiction, because addicts as long as they are in the process of consumption, are in denial. It's a very important part. No one who is in addiction, in active addiction, identifies as an addict. Very few people. And those who do are towards the end, the final stages, usually before recovery or death. So that's why so-called 12-step programs insist so much. So those are things like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous and many others. One of the foundations of those programs is you sit in a circle and you identify, my name is so-and-so, and I am an addict or an alcoholic or whatever. It's very important to recognize it. And what's interesting about our societies is that, to use the paradigm coined by Varoufakis of the adults in the room, we've built a civilization that purports to have the most reasonable, most educated people at its helm. And that's a great thing. You know, they're the adults in the room. But the reality is we have given the keys to the car to the people who have the best heroin and the best cocaine. They are, having spent a lot of time in your country of citizenship, going to the World Economic Forum. For many years, I thought, I'm not an addict. I'm not an addict because addicts are guys who shoot up on park benches. They are not hanging out at the World Economic Forum. They are not. I used to advise heads of state, and they don't hang out in presidential palaces. That's what I did. So I wasn't an addict. And then eventually in recovery, I had to recognize that I was. And then there was this first sort of shift where I had this unhealthy pride of having been such a high-functioning addict. Yes, I was a cokehead, but I was advising very important people, the masters of the universe, the adults in the room. So that's proof that I wasn't that screwed up. Mm-hmm. And eventually it dawned on me that I flourished in those circles, in those places, not in spite of my addiction to drugs, but because of it. It was the high of the high of power, the high of money, the high of thinking you're the hottest thing on earth is very similar to the high that you experience when you take a couple lines of cocaine. Very similar.
Psychologically similar. You mean like you have the same physical response or a similar physical response to it?
So I'm not a scientist, but there is research that shows that there are many things that can stimulate the same kind of chemical reactions in us that drugs do. Yeah. And, you know, there's adrenaline, for instance. You know, what I've learned is I thought that drugs were the things that were illegal that I was hooked on. But eventually I realized after I quit those that I was still addicted to drugs that were in my internal medicine cabinet. Adrenaline, dopamine, endorphins, etc. Some of them are healthy. Some of them are really good. They open me. They make me feel close to others, part of nature, so-called nature. They make me understand that I'm just one part of a big metabolism. And there are others of the other drugs in this internal medicine cabinet that actually separate me from others, that separates me from the metabolism, that gives me the illusion that I have a kidney have nothing to do with with the lungs,
Mm.
and that the lungs can just die. I don't need them, which obviously is insane. And I think so. To go back to Ellul, I think what's very powerful about his work is that he understands that propaganda is not, again, it's not merely sort of the work of Joseph Goebbels or, whatever. It's not all this sort of these evil people trying to make you believe lies. Propaganda is something that has emerged and that plays the role of a kind of cement in modern societies. Modern societies which are characterized by their technological societies. He calls them technician societies, or technical, I guess, in English. And what he means by that is not merely that we're all on our phones, or because obviously in the 60s it's a very different. He means something else. He means technological societies, and I would sort of write it as techno-logical, are societies where everything is decided according to how efficient it is.
Mm.
When you put efficiency at the helm of all your decisions, you lose meaning. And what results are people who are completely lost. They don't believe. They've been told that God is dead. They've been told that all these things that gave sort of texture and meaning to their lives is gone.
Yeah.
And so propaganda comes in and gives them a neat, very simple, very clear understanding of the world, of what's right, of what's wrong. And they just, and they crave this. It's not just that they are not equipped to see that it's bullshit. It's that they need it. We need it. And when I say they, I mean we. That's the other important thing about the addiction paradigm, is that addiction is not something that some of us suffer from and others don't. Addiction is there. And in some form or fashion, we can all fall into it and sort of free ourselves from it. But it's a constant process. You're never done.
Yeah.
It's a predicament rather than a problem.
Yeah, but society needs sense making, right? We need to be able to somehow understand our place in the world. Actually, that's coincidentally how I introduced this talk also. And we probably need to work out what's the difference between an addiction and between just a necessity, because I am addicted to breathing oxygen. As soon as I stop, I die, right? But we wouldn't frame that as an addiction, whereas a substance abuse or so on, we then usually classify as that. And if you take that into your metaphor, where's the break-off point between healthy sense making of the world, interpreting meaning, and what we are going through with like being having given the car keys to the people who sell and consume the best heroin?
So I think, first of all, I mean, it's really important for me to, I can only speak for myself, and I really can't. I don't want to project. Obviously, when I say this, it sounds like I'm just projecting my shit onto everyone else.
Yeah, but that can be a very, very healthy exercise in and of itself. So let's not discard the hell.
True. But I would say that, first of all, you have to recognize that this is a process. Like, it's not something that you do and then one day you're done and ta-da, you're enlightened. Like, we are all constantly going to be subject to propaganda. And what we can do is do the work. This is how I would define it, to educate ourselves at the cerebral level, at the cognitive level, but also at the same time do a work that has nothing to do with our intellect. So what I would say is needed to be able to deal with this ceaseless flooding, a cognitive flooding that we are subjected to, is you need to, first of all, free yourself from mainstream media, which are literally like crack cocaine. Like it's very, you said the word metaphor. Like I do not mean addiction as a metaphor. I believe from the bottom of my heart that the leading newspapers in the world and the leading media brands in the world are extremely toxic and are real drugs. They are absolutely very serious drugs. And the proof for me is in the pudding. Because without these drugs, we would not be whitewashing genocide.
Yeah.
So these are, I mean, this is the crack of this is the fentanyl of our times. And so on the one hand, what you need to do is to go to as many different when I speak to French people, I'm always sort of fascinated by their lack of information on France from people and media, independent media, which are not in France. That is the key. I don't want to be informed by the French about France. I don't want to be informed by the Swiss about Switzerland. And I do not want to be informed by about the world by, either CNN or Al Jazeera or, like the media, like we have to understand, we talk about global media as if there were a global ecosystem of media outside of Western countries and a handful of vassal states across the world who are mostly in the Middle East or in West Asia. This is that's the global media. That's it. So the first condition is you need to go to these, when I try to understand Europe, I go to independent African media because that gives me the most interesting take on Europe. And when and systematically, I would say, as someone who's spent, I'm from the north of the north. I mean by that, not that I come from, Norway. I mean by that as an analytical framework, rather than think of just the north of the north and the south, I find it very useful to think of the north of the north, the south of the north, the north of the south, and the south of the south. The north of the north are the people like me who've come from very privileged backgrounds from the West. Then you have the south of the north, which are usually poor people in the north and immigrants from the south who are doing the dirty work of making Disneyland look like Disneyland. Then you have the north of the south, which are the people in the south who live like the people in the north of the north. So a fraction of people in Bombay and Sao Paulo and all the southern capitals who send their kids to Harvard and live in another version of the Disneyland of the North.
The Western educated elites of the global South. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you have the South of the South, which is 75% of humans who live with $5 a day or less.
Yeah.
And so first of all, you need to do that. But the other work that I think is often sort of left aside and not really looked at is that growing up is about, we live in a world of toddlers, right? We're supposed to have the adults running the show, but they're not the elders that societies used to have who made collegially big decisions for the whole of the community. What we have again is the people with the best crack. So that's not okay. What we need collectively is to grow up. A culture worthy of the name takes children and knows how to turn them into grown-ups. Modern civilization doesn't know how to do that anymore. So we need to reparent ourselves because we need to grow up. It's urgent. And how do you grow up? Well, growing up is essentially about grief. Growing up is about grieving properly fantasies that we have told ourselves about our role and our place in the world, fantasies which reassure us, give meaning to our lives, but are based on lies. And the problem of our media is that all day long, they reaffirm those fantasies. They tell America that it's not an Israel that has been successful. It tells the French that French Algeria is not an Israel where Palestinians have won. So we need to do this work, and it means pulling on these threads, and those threads are painful. The work in recovery is extremely difficult. You come in, and when I came in, I thought, my goal is to stop putting 3 grams of white powder up my nose every other day, because if I don't, I'm going to die. By then, it had become very clear. But I didn't want to change anything else. And what I learned is that, and I'll let you, retort. What I learned is that I had to change only one thing. That's what you're often told in recovery. That's everything.
And I just want to interject because I know this from our previous private discussion, right? That this concept of parenting is actually one that's very important in addiction recovery, right? So this is also something that you're transporting there. But what you're saying now is that we need to do this on a societal level as an immature, addicted, let's say, civilization, because it's not just one country or the other. It's actually, and even when we do like North and South and West and so on, what we are talking about is that group right now that, together with the United States, Europe, New Zealand, Australia, I mean, that somehow we realize belongs together and does collectively a huge mistake right now, right?
So I would not represent this take on the importance of reparenting as a mainstream take on recovery. Okay. There's some people in the recovery who really think that this is a huge part of it. But I would imagine that it's not the majority. So I don't want to represent it as sort of this thing that's obvious. It's not. It's not mainstream, even in recovery. But when it comes to your question, I think it's not it's really not about the West. This is not about the West. It's about telling the West, it's about shutting up. It's about us realizing that our time's sort of over.
Who is
We
we?
need to, like, the West. Okay, the West needs to shut the fuck up.
and listen to the experiences of the others and the perceptions of the others.
Yeah, and to sort of, growing up, again, to take that sort of image, it requires you to just shut up and listen for a bit, Like I was listening to your show very recently about this representative of the European Union giving lessons to people in the Horn of Africa. It's unreal to hear this.
Yeah.
Unreal.
But this is the problem. I mean, that we would need a quantum leap in our thinking to stop pretending that we're the grown-ups of the world and we tell everybody how to run the show. I mean, we literally called everybody savages and little children and white man's burden, right? That's the framework that a lot of people are still in, right? And since we built all of these shiny institutions and made a lot of money, that was kind of taken as a proof of concept that this is the best of all pathways forward.
That's the ultimate gaslighting of the boomer generation.
Right.
That every time someone raised their hand and said, "This doesn't look very fair. This does not look. This looks very self-aggrandizing. This looks problematic. This looks like we're rewarding the biggest sociopaths. This looks like," every time, as I was growing up, I raised my hand and said this. I was basically told that was my position because I was envious of those who flourished in this sociopathic system, which is honestly it's I think for the generation of people who are the kids and the grandkids of boomers is the ultimate gaslighting of their lives.
But it is what keeps the system alive. So, I mean, you're alerting us to this issue again, that the sociopaths in power are then also the ones who make sure that the next generation comes on. And the ones in power are the ones who work with those in the media, who make sure that they are there and make sure that the narrative gets spread out the way it should, and thereby you create a unified kind of dysfunctional system. But it is a system, dysfunctional only in the sense that it's very, very unhealthy. And I think the longer it goes on, the more we see how unhealthy that is. Can you maybe talk a little bit why that is possible, also from your experiences of, I mean, did these politicians that you worked with and the forum, the Davos, is everybody snorting crack? Is everybody actually physically addicted?
No, they don't need. They have the best. When I say they have the best heroin in the world, what I mean is that the best heroin in the world is not brown sugar. It's not heroin. The best heroin in the world is the feeling that you have understood the world better than anyone else, and that you're going to save it because you are the only ones who are deeply, sincerely committed to improving the state of the world, which, as you probably know, is the motto of Davos.
Right.
That is there is no better crack. And yeah, we're wrapped in this in these delusions, and we've built an entire system based on them.
Do you differentiate between the propagandized and the propagandizers? I mean, should we take this apart, or are we always kind of?
No, I think that's what this binary thinking that we've inherited from Christianity, which we find all the way into our technology, right? It's very unhelpful. We're all we are all disseminating propaganda, and we are all receiving it, and we're all being reworked constantly by it. And I think the illusion that I think Ellul really sort of sheds a light on is this idea that if we do the right work, we can end up being only one or the other, or that we can cease to be propagandized and we can cease to propagandize others. No, what we are in the middle of is a dance. And if you stop dancing, it's over. You go back to something very unhealthy. So it's a constant motion, and we have to roll with it.
So the question, in a sense, is not how to stop the addiction. The question is how to get into a healthy balance of the interplay with the substance.
Yeah, and again, I think the grieving is a central part of what we need to do. You know, and when I say we, I mean it's not like this addiction is only affecting the West. It's affecting humans, right? I mean, the narrative is not solely bought by people in the West, in the North of the North. The narrative is bought everywhere. So even the people who are victims suffer from Stockholm syndrome, and you know, so it's not it's not. So to answer your question about like whether it's about leaving, you know, getting out of addiction or not, I think you need to like to grow up. What we need to do constantly is inform ourselves via the best information that we can get, which is exclusively these days almost in independent media, and multiply the sources. Again, like the only way to have a good sense of what's going on is to get, you know, the people who you strongly disagree with, people that you really agree with, and then multiply the geographies. And then eventually you get to somewhere where you can make some sense out of it all. And then you need to work on yourself. And I believe that that work requires not intellectual work, but connection. And what I mean by that is that, you know, we talk about connections all day long. In a way, what happened since 2006 is a guy with sort of clear intimacy issues devised an app to rank girls at Harvard from the prettiest to the ugliest, according to him. And what we were told is that this was going to allow us to connect with people all around the world. 20 years later, we spent half our time scrolling kittens, and the other half of the time, we are either in hate and disconnect, or in sort of, you know, mingling only with people we agree with.
Yeah. So social media is not in and of itself a way out either. It's a way deeper in.
It's a very deeply, it's very antisocial. Very antisocial. It's asocial media. And so what I found in recovery at some point is that the gold for me was when I was able to share, or I heard other people share from a place of vulnerability. When you start giving up the CV version of what's going on, of who you are, and you start telling people how you felt yesterday when you thought of the death of your grandfather and how it reminded you of this or that, that is the gold. That is what allows me to relate with people in a way that is extremely powerful and that allows me to disconnect from the propaganda.
How do we
So you need to do this work. It's like it's two. There's two different handles. There's the actually going out there and getting your news from different sources, and then there is the letting go of the stories completely and focus not on what's going on here, but what's going on here. And when you're able to do that with other people, you can start the conversations about our politics, about where the world should go from a very, very different place.
Right. How do we potentiate that from the personal to the societal level? Because in a sense, you and I speaking here and the people listening to us, we're preaching to the converted, largely. Maybe every once in a while, somebody who just accidentally clicks gets stuck and, sucked in. Who knows? But basically what we need is what you're outlining on a societal level. With people who are by design, by the way the system is designed, are highly hostile to everything you just said because they already understood the world. They tell us what fake news is, right? And we're fake news. Do you have an idea how we can potentiate these insights?
I think the bad news is that no one gets into recovery because they think it's an interesting social project.
Right.
It's not a social club. You come into recovery because it's become obvious that you're going to die.
Right.
If you don't. And in recovery it's called the primary purpose. And I think like if you try to do this without that primary purpose, eventually the day comes where you're just busy or you're tired or you're not in the mood, and you're often told in recovery you should go to a meeting with other people like you, especially when you don't want to go. That's when you need it the most. And because you have this this imperative, you go because it's your life that's in the game, that's in the balance, right? So I believe that the pandemic provided such a moment because suddenly we were all realizing, it became very clear to a lot of people at the same time, especially privileged people, that what they had come to find very normal was the definition of abnormal. In so many ways, like I think I don't need to expand much, but like suddenly it was very clear that there were some things that we had taken for granted, which we should not have. I have to say that we are a civilization that has turned the crime of the people that I come from, the Jewish and the Roma Holocausts, we've sacralized them and turned them into this thing that defines good and evil beyond, outside of history, beyond, outside of time. And what has happened in the past 2 years, plus years, is that we have shown that we have completely failed in metabolizing the true meaning of those crimes.
Yes.
And so I have the hope, and then call me wishful thinking, wishful thinker, but I have the hope that this moment is a moment where we can see that while we pretended that what had shocked us in the Shoah was what humans were capable of doing to one another, what actually shocked us was that we had done to white people in Europe what we had been doing for 500 years to the rest of the world.
Precisely.
And it's not, and where it's, we should, the incredible thing about this realization is that there are people who understood it at the time. If you look at the Frankfurt School, the work of Horkheimer and Adorno, or if you look at Jacques Ellul, who was in the resistance in France, or if you look at the work of Aimé Césaire, the father of decolonial thinking, sort of a lesser known cousin of Fanon. Césaire in 1950 or 1951, he published a discourse on colonialism, and he said exactly that. He said, you guys are pretending that that what you're shocked by is sort of universal. It's not. And the proof is in the pudding. It's a bit like, again, I thought this talk of yours recently was so good. It's like this moment when you have the French Revolution and then you have Haiti that rebels, and you say, oh, no, wait. And I mean, if you look at Haiti, it's an amazing example because Haiti, I don't have the figures in my mind right now, but Haiti was forced by the French to pay back their freedom.
Mhm.
They're becoming independent for decades and decades, maybe over 100 years. Every year, one of the poorest countries in the world today. And
Yeah.
and the culture that we come from, the culture of the adults in the room, tells us Haiti is in this state because it didn't follow the guidelines of the World Bank. I mean, are you for fucking real?
Yeah.
And so I think to come back to this moment that we are in, I think there's something that in all this horror, there is gold. The question is, are we going to use it? Or are we going to let people like the CEO of Palantir decide where we go from here?
But I mean, we've been working, and for all of the bad things we can say about the West, we must also say we've always also been working at trying to figure out what the hell we are doing, and more often than not, we then also end up like killing those people, the ones who tell us and so on, or try to tell us. I think Socrates is a very ancient example of stuff like that. But when we connect these dots, I think that's when we can find a bit of gold. And you are just pointing out the other dot, of course, that the West, the global North, needs to get to grips with. That's not just the propaganda, that's the addiction. It's also this conscious ignoring of colonialism and how deeply embedded it is. And that pops up in my discussions time and time again as well.
I mean,
you already talked about it, but can you go into that?
I think like it's really important to you say like we've also always been good at sort of asking the right questions and sort of questioning.
Yeah,
I would say like a very small fraction of Westerners has been trying, and they are not less outliers than the people who have done exactly the same thing in all parts of the world, whom no one remembers the name of.
right.
So it's human. It's not
Yeah.
our civilization that has produced this. And I think there's I think what's happening, and this is what I love about the journey of neutrality studies, is when I first encountered you and this work, I thought, oh, it's because he's Swiss. It's it's that simple. It's just a cultural interest in neutrality. And then I saw you move, you neutrality studies, but also you, Pascal. I can see you journey. Like you're going, you're sort of, you're dealing more and more with the stuff of some dark stuff that has eluded mainstream culture in the West for very long, but it's been there. It's been there for a long time. There's a Argentine professor named Walter Mignolo, who's been writing for many years about the inextricable entanglement of modernity and coloniality. There is there's a long tradition of Latin American scholars. Aníbal Quijao comes to mind, who have been working on this for a very long time. So it's there. It's just we've never wanted to hear it. I remember, like, one of my moments of truth was I was watching when I was getting interested before the pandemic. I had this moment, I really believe that my recovery from substances has allowed me to recover from stories. It's the same process, and it was launched. I had to first stop cocaine to stop the New York Times. It's a process. And
And you mean that literally, right? That's like literally the journey that you went through. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I had to, and at some point, I became very interested in, climate change and collapse. And I saw there was this fashion of people talking about collapse
Mm.
all around the West. And what they were talking about was something really interesting. It wasn't collapse of they thought they were talking about collapse of the universe, collapse of the world, collapse of everyone. But what they were talking about was the moment where in London or Geneva or Tokyo, people would start fighting for bags of rice at the supermarket. And that's when I realized that collapse is not what might happen one day to the north of the North. Collapse is the way most humans have been forced to live by us for a long time.
Mm. So the fear of the collapse is the fear of what of this coming back to us.
Exactly. It's basically, it's a recognition, or it's a confession. It's a confession. It's a confession of the fact that if what happened, if what we have done to the rest of the world happened to us,
Mm-hmm.
we would just disintegrate. And I would, I think that I don't know how close to the end we're getting close to the end, right?
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes to.
Sure. But I would say, in the insane level of denial that we are witnessing in our mainstream media about what is happening in the world, the fact that kids on campuses are getting arrested for saying what's happening.
Mm.
That's it. And the fact that it's normalized, the fact that the country that has actually done the Jewish and Roma Holocaust has criminalized the defense of Palestinians and has gone as far as arresting descendants of the Jewish Holocaust for defending. I mean, that kind of schizophrenia, of sociopathy, that it's not even covered, not properly in our mainstream media. It says something about where we are. And I think that where we are, deep down, is that you'll probably remember that Seymour Hersh in the 90s came out with a book called The Samson Doctrine. And the nuclear program of Israel had been common knowledge for a decade. But what Seymour showed was that the missiles, he showed the extent of the program, which no one had any clue of how many nukes they had. But he showed that they were aimed, these nukes, not just at Tehran or Cairo. They were aimed at Moscow. They were aimed at Paris. They were aimed at London. And this is, he didn't confirm it, but that they were probably also aimed at some cities on the East Coast of the US. And the Samson Doctrine, which was the name of this, was named after, the biblical Samson, which sort of, the whole temple falls and kills everyone. If I'm going to die, you're all going to die. Now think of where we are and what we have witnessed in the past years. Isn't it fair to assume that what we are seeing in, without the words, is the expression of a Western Samson doctrine, which is we are realizing that our time is over. And the bottom line is, if we can no longer be at the top of this pyramid, we're just going to destroy it.
We will take it with us.
Yes. So I think that's where we are. And paradoxically, this sounds like a apocalyptic. I have learned in recovery, it's one of the gifts of recovery, is for me, not behaving like a jackass, one action at a time, is an end in itself. If I go to bed tonight and I have done that, that's, I'm a happy person. And I believe that we are at a moment, all generations like to pretend that, right now is the most important time, right? We have this sort of generational narcissism.
Yes.
And I suffer from it like we all do. But I would say it's likely that we are at a tipping point. And it's very scary, but I also am fundamentally extremely hopeful, because we only change through pain. And the pain that we are seeing out there is humongous. And I think that the potential for behavioral change on a, massive scale is there.
Yeah. Thank you for this. I mean, I find this very valuable. I find frameworks valuable. I find ways of conceptualizing the world valuable. And I think you've hit on an extremely helpful one. I keep thinking for a while, that one of the goals of neutrality studies is not necessarily to talk to our fellow people out there. I mean, on the one hand, there's those who agree with us, and to them, I told you before, I think of it as a kind of a self-help group to say like, hey, by the way, you're not alone. But the other goal is to talk to those outside, to our friends in Africa, to our friends in Southeast Asia, in Russia, and so on, that, by the way, we are aware that we need help. We need help. And it probably has to be your help. And you probably at some point have to take us by the hand and say like, dear West, we love you dearly, but we need to sit down for a talk. And
Yeah, and I think I would answer to that a couple of things. Number one is, um, we love you dearly. Like, I think at this stage they don't, and it's okay. It's very understandable.
yeah,
We don't love you dearly. You fucking suck.
it's
And
okay.
you've
You can
been,
lie to us. Please lie to us.
yeah, no, but also like you have been gaslighting the world
Yeah,
for the last 500 years.
yeah.
You have basically raped us and murdered us and enslaved us and robbed us of our natural resources while telling us that you were civilizing us.
Yes,
So
but
we're not going
you have
we're
a, you
not
have a,
going
you have a rapist, we have a rapist murderer in front of you with a nuclear club in his hand. So I think we need to somehow calm that one down and say like, okay,
I think you know, like so I would still be very cautious with this "we love you"
all right.
West. No, I'm like I'm not sure that it's warranted. You know, for me that would be Stockholm syndrome right now. Um, the other thing is that it's not the job of the South to help the West be less of a jackass.
Yeah, but it's a Samson jackass because we are literally threatening annihilation of our species. So we need help. We need help.
Yeah, but I think like the people who are um the people who have their hand on the missile are beyond help. And we need to recover not for the sake of anyone else, but our own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's very important to not, to not be like, oh, non-West, please help us be less Nazi.
West.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's our job to
Yeah.
denazify.
In that case, we need to figure out how to denazify ourselves. I can't. Yeah. Um, Felix, thank you. Thank you very much. We didn't even get to talk about Black Elephant, but people who want to find out about that.
In a way, we didn't, because the connection that I was referring to, the vulnerability-based social network or anti-social network or anti-Facebook
Mm.
is Black Elephant. We can talk about it next time.
Let's do that next time. And everybody, if you want to find Felix Marquard, they can find you under blackelephant.com, I suppose.
Probably. I'm trying to be very I'm hard to find these days on the web, but I'm sure it's possible somehow.
I know that there's more work of yours coming in the near future. We will broadcast that one again. So Felix Marquard, thank you very much for your time today.